Thank you so much for coming. I'm Carrie Weber. I'm the Executive Director of the Fairfield University Art Museum. It's my great pleasure to welcome you here this evening. We're really excited about this conversation that we're going to have with Deb Willis and Halima Taha, focusing on the fantastic photographic career of Adger Cowans. If you haven't had a chance yet to see the exhibition, it is in the Bellarmine Hall Galleries. It's there till June 18th. Please don't miss it. It is stunning. You are going to get a little preview of it this evening if you haven't seen it. I'd like to thank the Fairfield University Black Studies Program for co-sponsoring this event this evening, and I'd also like to thank Connecticut Humanities for the recent Cultural Fund Grant Award, which is allowing us to live stream and record tonight's program. I understand we have a large group watching virtually tonight, so welcome to all of you. And I want to make sure that those people know, but also all of you, that you can access a virtual tour of the exhibition on our exhibition website. You can read the exhibition brochure there. Our exhibition curator, Halima Taha, who you're going to meet shortly, made a great jazz Spotify playlist with input from Adger Cowans. You can access that there. And for those of you who don't know, Connecticut Public Radio did a great piece on Adger that just aired on NPR Morning Edition on Saturday. You can watch that and listen to that on the webpage as well. I hope you will come back next week, April 20th. There's going to be another really exciting program with Adger and Larry Silver, whose work I hope you got a chance to see in the Walsh Gallery before you came in this evening. Their respective guest curators, Halima Taha and Leslie Brown, will be in conversation with the two artists. I think it will be a fun, lively evening with the two artists talking about their mentors, their influences. Both of them came to Connecticut about the same time, talking about that transition from New York to Connecticut. It should be a lot of fun. So you can find out about all of that on our Eventbrite page or on our website. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speakers this evening. As I mentioned, Halima Taha is the guest curator for the Adger Cowans exhibition. She's recognized as an art professional who's contributed to the field as a curator, appraiser, art advisor, educator, and speaker for more than 20 years. She's best known for her groundbreaking bestseller, Collecting African American Art, Works on Paper and Canvas, the first book to validate collecting fine art, printmaking, and photography by Americans of African descent as viable assets and commodities within the marketplace. Since its release, this title has provided solid market criteria for publishers to print more artist monographs and African American art collection books, independent from museum shows within the first 2 decades of the 21st century. In addition, her expertise provided the foundation, in conjunction with the National Black Fine Arts Show, for cultivating and educating a global audience that enabled Swan Galleries to successfully establish the first international African American art auction category in 2008. Her work was also the catalyst for ushering major museums to actively pursue collections of African American art for exhibition and acquisition within the first 2 decades of this century. She's an arts advocate committed to nurturing the development, documentation, and acquisition of Black visual culture as a professional speaker and arts writer. Adger Cowans almost doesn't need any introduction, but I'll just say a little bit about him. Born in Columbus, Ohio, and one of the first African American students to earn a degree in photography from Ohio University in 1958, he studied under Clarence H. White Jr. and later with Minor White. His education continued at the School of Motion Picture Arts and School of Visual Arts in New York City. Cowans secured a position assisting photographer Gordon Parks at Life magazine and later served in the U.S. Navy in Virginia Beach, Virginia. He had an illustrious career in cinema as a film still photographer on over 30 Hollywood sets, working with directors like Francis Ford Coppola, Sidney Lumet, and Spike Lee. He's celebrated as one of the founding members of Kamoinga Group and has won numerous awards and fellowships. The Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Museum of Modern Art, the Harvard Art Museums, the International Center of Photography, the Whitney Museum of American Art, and numerous other art institutions have shown his photographs. Finally, also needing almost no introduction, Deborah Willis, Phd, is university professor and chair of the Department of Photography and Imaging at the Tisch School of the Arts at New York University, has affiliated appointments with the College of Arts and Sciences, Department of Social and Cultural, and the Institute of Fine Arts, where she teaches courses on photography and imaging, iconicity and cultural histories, visualizing the Black body, women, and gender. She is also the director of NYU's Center for Black Visual Culture, Institute for African American Affairs. Her research examines photography's multifaceted histories, visual culture, contemporary women photographers, and beauty. She received the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Fellowship and was a Richard D. Cohen Fellow in African and African American Art, Hutchins Center, Harvard University, a John Simon Guggenheim Fellow, and an Alphonse Fletcher Jr. Fellow. She is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and received awards from the College Art Association for Writing Art History and the Outstanding Service Award from the Royal Photographic Society in the UK. She has pursued a dual professional career as an art photographer and is one of the nation's leading historians of African American photography and curator of African diasporic cultures. She has authored, co-authored, and or edited numerous books, papers, and articles on a range of subjects. She lectures widely and has curated numerous exhibitions, and her artwork has been included in many exhibitions at institutions across the US. In addition to making art, curating exhibitions, writing, and teaching, she's served as a consultant to museums, archives, and educational centers. We're so happy that Deb and Adger are friends of such long standing that she was willing to take the time out of her very busy schedule to be with us here today. Please welcome to the stage our guest speaker.
It's always good to see new and familiar faces together in pursuit of increasing our knowledge about ourselves and the world in which we live through art in general, and then of course this evening in particular, photography. And as we know, photography is many things, but it's also an instrument of memory, experience, and documentation that helps explore culture, the values of oneself, family, community. And you know, when I was riding the train, it occurred to me that the sum of our collective experiences comes through a tradition of necessity. In 1976, his student, David Driscoll, continuing this tradition of necessity, wrote and curated an exhibition called 2 Centuries, Black American Art. 2 Centuries of Black American Art. And at that point, he was saying, yes, we have a history. It never, ever, ever, ever been any documentation about the history or even the names of Black photographers in the United States. And so her book, Black Photographers 1840 to 1940, was the first to establish a record and also create the springboard, not only for your scholarship, but also for the field. And then after her publication in 1997, Dr. Richard Powell wrote Black Visual Culture in the 20th Century, which was the first interdisciplinary book to focus on the literary, performing, and the visual arts, and how they, within Black culture and Black cultural production, how they interacted with one another. And following this tradition was collecting African American artworks on paper and canvas, because now that there has been a body of history that's been documented, what I wanted to do is to say, hey, we have this history, and this is how you can collect this as valuable assets and commodities. This is historical materialism. And Adger is, one of the founding members of Kamoinge, which is the oldest not-for-profit photography organization in the United States. It's 60 years old, and its mission is to honor, document, and preserve the history and culture of the African diaspora with integrity and insight for humanity through the lens of Black photographers. But also, we're very fortunate to be able to gain insight from Adger about his work, not only as a photographer, but also how he navigated a new field that in the course of his life as it was being defined and redefined, because, as early
When I think about photography as advocacy, I think about his work in the early years in photography, photographing in the South. But I also want you all, as I go through some of these images, to see what excited me about him. Adger is looking at shapes of life. He's shaping and reshaping life in a different way. His camera angle is unique. He's looking at reflections and refractions. He's looking at over the tops of buildings, and he's creating a new language of photographic image, such as this first image here is the shadow. And can you talk about how you created and discovered this fantastic way of looking?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I don't know who you're talking about. It's always interesting to hear, so I can relate stories about the work or how I felt. So this photograph was shot very early out at Fire Island in New York, and this was in the early evening. And I like shadows. I do a lot of shadows. And when I saw this photograph, I thought the distance from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet is probably from here probably to the back of the room. That's how the distance is. But because it's all sand, it looks very flat. And that really excited me. I felt like I'm on top of the world, so to speak. I have a bird's eye view of my own shadow, and that was exciting.
Yeah, and it's sculptural as well. I can see this in a number of sculptures of people working in the 20th century. And as you said, this angle, in terms of scale, creates another way of reading the body. Shadows, as he mentioned, really important. And let's see something about how this is a reminder of how we're looking. What do we see? This car is, where are you? Where's your vantage point in this?
I'm looking out a window on the 3rd floor in the Bronx. And it was in the early evening, and I had just eaten. My friend had made something to eat, and I was going to take a nap. And I said, oh, the sun is beautiful. I had been up on the roof, and I looked out the window, and I saw these 3 young ladies coming. And I thought, look at those shadows. I'd really like to get those, So I ran, I got my camera, and I waited for them. There are 3 shots. The first shot is you see the shadows, but you don't see the girls. The next shot is they're almost in the frame, not quite. Guy turning, have the 3 tops in the car. So I waited for that photograph, and I took it right at the time. I thought it was going to be perfect. Because to me, a shadow is a reflection of who you are to some degree. If you didn't have a shadow, I would be worried. I would think you weren't human if you didn't have a shadow. But it's a reminder in some ways of who we are. Those shadows get filled with the life. They get, filled with living. They get filled with all kinds of things. And I thought the symbol of the 3 ash cans there it just was a perfect photograph for me.
Yeah, what I see is a sense of fulfilling a dream, in a sense, that the way that you're walking through, like, we can't see this, but this is imagined only through your lens. And what type of camera did you use at that time?
I like a M2.
And-
which was my first camera.
And we can't, and I'm glad you said that because I love the Leica M2 as well. But the car, can you talk about that car? Is it yours?
No, it's not my car. It was just a car on the street, but I think it was an Oldsmobile.
Yeah, it looks like an Oldsmobile. And the reflection of that car is all about the way the concrete reflects the light, this kind of exchange of what happens when we're interpreting life experiences. 3 ash cans, 3 figures, one with the bag. Is it a bag of a handbag, or is it a bag that needs to go to the trash can? Where are they going? And it's
where
a
are
poetic,
they going?
It's a poetic moment that you've captured and held us to experience. This image here just blew me away, and just the idea. The title is Malcolm X. Where is he?
Malcolm Speaks
Right.
is the name of the photograph, yeah. He was at 116th Street at Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard. And I was shooting, down on the floor and all around, and I thought, I wonder what this would look like if I got way up on the building. So I buzzed somebody's buzzer. They said, "Who is it?" I said, "Police." They buzzed me, and I ran up the steps. I ran up to the top floor, and I looked out, and I thought I would see something like this, but what blew me away was the fact that these shadows of all these people, and how many people there were. People think that Malcolm X had a few people that he talked to on the corner, but this is a lot of people, and a lot of people came to hear Malcolm speak, and I just thought it was such a great photograph. And I made sure that the box was to the side, which reflected the other light box there and the other squares around him, but then the shapes of the people and the reflections of the shadows on the ground. It was an amazing picture to me.
And it still remains amazing.
Yeah.
When we think about the number of people here, you are documenting, you're also making an aesthetic statement, and we're also understanding the importance that Malcolm, as you say, speaks, his spoken word, what it meant for people to experience Malcolm at this time.
I just want to say that one of the things I really love about this image is the interplay between the shadow, but also from this perspective and the distance, it's pointillism. In painting, it's pointillism. All the dots, all the head, but it's on a and the way that it works, it's you can see it. It's literal, but it's also very abstract. And I just like the fact that the way that your eye travels in it, and then whether you know what's happening, you know that it's a moment of importance and significance. And people in a space from a vantage point that we often don't see. Even if we're in a plane, we never see this looking down. But I also happen to like the print. That's the other thing. Adger's prints I also.
Yeah, well, the white shirts.
Yeah.
You enhance the way that it's shot. You enhance the white and the black, but also you enhance and you tell us a love story. And this, to me, is a love story.
Right.
And I see it.
People love Malcolm. Oh boy.
This
That's really
is
early.
just an amazing way of looking at reflections. How do we see this coming out of a subway?
Well, you see, in those days, I didn't have a lot of money, and I was eating sardines and crackers for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But I think that I was working downtown printing for somebody, and when I got ready to go up the steps, I saw this reflection. It's actually turned the way you're seeing it now, but when I saw it, was upside down. And I thought, I shot about 3 pictures standing there, because the water was almost still, not quite. And these people were going by, and it looked like a window into another world for me, because the subway was solid rock and stuff, but here's this puddle of water that reflects these people.
It's a pleasurable experience that you could see water, and again, the way it's printed, the abstraction really enhanced the storytelling moment. And this 125th Street?
Mm-hmm. This is Michaud's bookstore. This was a bookstore that he played latest music of the day and African music and all kinds of stuff. It was summertime. And that bookstore was very famous because people would come from all over to go in this bookstore. It was the only bookstore when I came here you could find books on African history, on African subject matter, everything, art, etc. Different papers that people had written were in that bookstore. And the speakers were loud. They played all kind of music. And everybody that I know, all my friends who were interested in history, went to that bookstore because you could find books that were nowhere else. You know, Malcolm went to that bookstore, and Nkrumah went to that bookstore. A lot of the African students went to that bookstore. A lot of white students, everybody went to that bookstore because that was the library where you could find American Black history, art, science, everything that you could think of was in that bookstore. And I was really sorry that, they had to take it down, and they moved it, but it was never the same. Mm-hmm. You go in there and people would be sitting in the back. I mean, the books went from the floor to the ceiling on all four walls. You never saw that many books. I had never seen that many books, maybe in the library. But it was covered. They were on the table. They were just stacked up. And he would be sitting in the middle of it. And somebody would walk in the bookstore and say, I'm looking for you. In the back, on top, on the left, third book over. So he's kidding you. But he knew where every book was and the history of it. So that's not the good one. The second edition is better. They include the history of the Nile River and the this and the that and the history of what happened in France back in 42. He just had all this in his head, and it was a great bookstore to go to. So
also, what you captured in this image also is, the aesthetics of Harlem, the recreation of Harlem, the politics of Harlem, and this community. So you captured. This is mid-block,
right.
So we see the liveliness of this community, but then there's a jewelry store, there's someone selling Eskimo pies, but there's this movement, but it's quiet. Mm-hmm. It's really a reflexive moment, the way that you photographed it. Do you remember the time of day?
Yeah, it was toward noon. If you look at the shadows, they're almost straight down.
Mm-hmm. And, the American flag, central. Mm-hmm. So we see this sense of citizenship and how important it is for the Central Republican Club. We see the loudspeakers. So this whole experience of the social events of Harlem captured.
Oh boy. This is Roy D. Carrara on 125th Street. And Roy was a very hard person to photograph. And if he saw you taking these pictures, he would, don't take that, don't take my picture. He was very, adamant. And I just felt that I caught, to me, what Roy was all about. That's his bike that he rode around Harlem on, and he's got 2 bungee cords on his Leica. And that was Roy to me. And I just liked everything behind him, the composition, the bike, the way he was standing, and I thought it was just a perfect composition. I said, well, I could come over a little bit to the left, maybe, and include the arm in it, but I like this just the way it is, because the diagonal works with his arm, and the black space works. It just works all together, and that's Roy to me. That's
a lot of movement in that program.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad you stood there and photographed it, but also his biker gloves.
Yeah. Well, I had to sneak because he just said something to me. And I said, yeah, right. You have to be fast. And I used to rehearse with my camera. I wouldn't put film in it. And I would rehearse with focusing, shooting, focusing, getting. So I had it down to a rhythm. I could go from here to here, click, here to here, click, like that. Rather than like, what am I stop? By that time, the image is gone. So there was a lot of time that I spent rehearsing with my camera. Just like a musician playing scales, it has to be fluid. It has to go from here to here, The eyes just feels, the heart that feels. So you try, and if you shoot that picture at the height of your heartbeat, I think, or your feeling, you have it because you felt it. It's a matter of timing, but you have to be ready for it. You can't wait till it's there. You see people say, "Oh, that was a great picture. Did you see that?" Yeah, I saw it, but you didn't take a picture of it. It was in your head, but to rehearse enough, and in those days you only had film, 36 shots. You didn't have cameras like they have today, where you can shoot 500 pictures. So you had to really time everything and be careful. You had to look and feel.
Yeah, and the way that you looked at this image, the broken down chair, I don't know if it's a broken down chair, but it looks broken down when I saw it. Is this a second-hand shot?
Second-hand shot.
And the way the bike is, there's this, it's just lovely the way you captured that. And this, I've known you for over 40 years. I never knew that you were down in Mississippi photographing.
Really?
Never knew it until we had that talk in Houston. Blew me away. And so there's another archive that you need to share with us. So can you talk about this image?
Yeah, this was, I guess about 2 or 3 days after Medgar Evers was killed. And I had got a grant from the Whitney people. And I said, well, what am I going to do? And I was watching on the TV, and I said, I got to go do something there. So my agent called me and said, I forget the man's name. He would like you to go down. I said, I want to go. So I went to Life magazine because I knew all the people because I worked with Gordon there. And I said, I got this, I don't have any money. He said, okay, we'll give you some film. So they gave me 300 rolls of film, which is a lot. And I thought he made a mistake. I said, man, that's a lot of film. I had a bag full of film. So I got on the bus, and I went there on the bus because I wanted to have the feel of going through the country as opposed to flying. And this picture is, it's mine. He became...
John Lewis?
John Lewis. John Lewis. That's John Lewis. A young John Lewis. Doesn't look anything like what he looked like as he got older, but that's him getting out of the bus there in Jackson, Mississippi.
And in terms of you entering into Jackson, you were on like a Greyhound bus. And these are the people from Mississippi, the workers who are taking a school bus.
These are the children coming from school mostly, and people coming to the conference. There was a conference that was held, but there was a singing actually. Everybody was saying, "We shall overcome." The police were lined all around the whole crowd. There's another shot that I have of some other people there. Theodore Bacall.
I want to see it.
I
want to see it. There's 300 rolls of film. I want to see it.
Oh, this was when the wigs started, and people were wearing wigs, and black women were wearing different kinds of, straight hair wigs, all these different wigs. And this was a rebuff of all that concept and that idea. And this is on 125th Street. And I just love
Slider's
this.
says a lot, the drawing.
Yeah.
There's a talk back.
Right.
The way that they're
I
showing
love
it.
the signs.
Yes, the signs are amazing. And again, signage.
Signage, yeah.
Text.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And if you read this, I don't know if you can read that from home.
The 1961, the Mighty Comanche.
Yeah, the Mighty Comanches had just began. They were bad motherfuckers from 9th Street. They were bad motherfuckers that couldn't be beat. And then now it says, China Lee, wonderful rat.
So when we think about, graffiti, and we think about the messages that, gangs in the community, people in the community really experience, and through another one in terms of text of the community.
This is on 145th Street off of Convent.
I love her in the window.
Well, you see people in New York, in most neighborhoods, you see people sitting in the window. In the village, downtown, Harlem, all the people, there's always somebody sitting in the window, looking out.
The street was theater to them.
Exactly right. I mean, I got a lot of pictures looking out the window. Yeah, no money. Say, well, what's going on the street? Let me see.
But printing this, must
Oh,
have
yeah.
been a challenge.
Yeah, the challenge in printing this was to keep the whites white and the shadows open.
And that
So,
darkened room.
Yeah. So you can see the screen, but I think I made a solution of Beers A and Beers B to develop the negative. Back in the day, there was a book that most photographers had in their studio, and it was called the Photo Lab Index, and in it had all kinds of formulas and all kinds of things you could do to your film if it wasn't the way you wanted it to be. You could put more silver in it, you could make it thinner, negative, you could do all kinds of things. And then you had these different types of developers that you could mix together that would work on the shadow area or work on the highlight area. So I was very into printing. I printed for a lot of people in New York because they liked my prints, but my sense of printing came from Edward Weston. That was the first photographer that I saw that had such beauty in his prints that they looked almost 3D. They were just beautiful. Archie Shep, without his horn, without him playing, without any accents that you would think that he's a musician. But if you look at this picture, this is a cool dude. You can tell he's cool by the shape of his hat. No, he's cool. Brothers in their hats is a big thing. And the way that he was looking straight ahead. And the light on his chin, which was coming in from behind, and the nose. And I had to really be careful about the shadow. I didn't want his ear to be so prominent that it killed the profile. And then I said, well, what am I going to do with that white edge? I started to block it out, but then when I really looked at it, I realized the white was perfect. It's a perfect shape, that edge, because you go back and forth between the black and white. But then you come to his profile, and it has this speed. It's like, feels like, this guy's moving. And he was. He's a great saxophone player, Archie Shep. And his son, Across Shep, is a photographer. Yeah. This picture was one of the early pictures that I took. I was 17 years old when I took this picture. My first camera was a roller cord. And I got that camera by going downtown to Lazarus department store and signing. In those days, right after the war, you could buy things on time. So I went down and I bought a roller cord camera and a hi-fi set. And they came and I signed Adger W. Cowans. And so the stuff came to the house. My father had a fit. He was going, what are you doing there? Well, my father's name is Adger Cowans. So I signed Adger W. My mother had to keep my father off of me. She said, honey, don't beat him so bad. He was beating me bad. You know, they would call the police nowadays. They call child abuse. He beat the snot out of me. My mother said, honey, that's your son, that's your oldest son. So he finally stopped, but he walloped me really good. I said, I'm gonna give it back to you, Dad. He said, you ain't gonna have that kind of money. I think the whole thing came to like about $300. This is 1953. You could buy a dozen eggs for $1. So he had a fit, but then finally, he left me alone. And then years later, I did pay him the money back because I was a paper boy, and I think that Christmas, I got $82 in tips. So I gave all to him. So I know I saw you. So when I first came to New York, and I was working with Gordon and assisting other people too, I made a lot of money. I was making like $500 a week. So I went home one weekend and I put $300 in his hand. He said, where'd you get this money? Old people in the days, if you come in with something like that, it's like, they don't believe it, first of all. And then, where did you get it? I know you didn't work for it. What did you do? You did something to get this money. So I said, he said, where'd you get this money? I said, it's yours, Daddy. He said, yeah, but where'd you get it? I said, taking pictures. He said, taking pictures? He looked at the money like that. Taking pictures? I said, yeah. He said, That's the way old people sometimes express themselves. My grandfather was like that. And my grandmother would call him and say, George Washington, he said, you did something? I said, George Washington, you gonna do just grunts and groans,
But the point was made.
The point was made.
Yeah.
The point was made.
It was very clear.
Yeah. So
in
this
terms of
picture,
these
these
children,
kids, I was looking at them. I was shooting pictures down by my grandmother's church, Shiloh Baptist Church, and these kids were looking at the balloon man. They were looking like, oh my God, I just could get a balloon, something. So I bought a balloon for each one of them. I think they were like a penny or something, 2 cents. And I gave it to them. And I said, can I take your picture? And they said, yeah, the guy took a picture. Well, at first I thought, oh, it's a picture of some poor kids with balloons, Nobody's gonna look at this. And then as I looked at it, I realized this picture was about their smiles. It was about how happy they were. It didn't matter, they could be green. It didn't matter. It mattered that they were so happy with that. And that really led me into later on understanding when I showed it to people, when I show my work to people, and I listen to what they say. I don't ever want to show my work and say, well, it means this or it means that, and you don't see it, or well, I let people tell me what they feel or what they see, and I learned that it was a sort of a cheap psychology into their head, because people only talk about themselves. They can't say anything, they don't know anything about me. So in talking about the work, it led me to understanding people more and more. And as I did it, I really got a really good sense of people's movement, and their thoughts around art, especially around photography. So that's what it was about for me when I finally figured out what that was about.
And it is coincidentally the man in the back walking also.
Yeah, he's a worker going to the market to do some work. And the old cars from the 40s, So it's a working background. It's not,
cars in the back.
Yeah, I'm not like taking some notes and putting it up and photographing. It feels organic.
Oh, it's a wonderful image, and I love the joy. I don't know if they're saying anything, but it's just.
No, they were just smiling. They were really happy.
And this one, to me, you know, when I thought of you as, are you a musician? You know, when you bought the hi-fi, but then you see the interiority of a space, a house. Again, light,
Right.
ebony, you know, bless this house. So it's about family. You talk about,
Yeah, this is my mother's piano. My mother was a piano player of sorts. She was the backup piano player for the church we went to. If the main piano lady didn't show up, my mother would stand in front. And she played that song a lot. It's dog-eared, you can see it's beat to death. But she played it a lot, and that's my little cornet on the end of the piano there. And at church time on Sundays, my mother would play the piano and I would play the trumpet. And our favorite song was Trees. And of course, Ebony magazine came out, and everybody, if you were black, if you didn't have Ebony magazine, you didn't have Jet, you didn't have, you know, forget about Life or Look, that was too expensive. But if you didn't have Ebony magazine, you weren't black. It was just the magazine of the times. And that's a
is
picture
that
on
your
the,
photograph in there?
that's a photograph of me, yeah, on the top far right.
Oh.
When I was in high school, and the other's my brother. He was in the Army, joined the Army, and the other's my cousin and her friend, and then my other brother, Vincent, and my sister. I took that picture at her wedding. So in the fringe, you know, my mother liked doilies and fringe. She liked all that stuff. So, and I just felt that that said everything about a black family, especially about my family.
Yeah.
But, you know, I had this in a show in Chicago, and this white dude came up, and he was a Southerner, and he said, I like that picture. I thought, oh, God, what's he going to say? You know, when I hear that voice, I go like, ugh. He said, I'm going to buy that because it reminds me of the way I grew up in my house. We had a piano like that, and the pictures on the top, it said, it really reminds me of where I come from.
So the universality to
The universality. And that's when I realized that it was more about him identifying with family and identifying with music, etc. It was beautiful. He's, you know, it was great. It was great. That's me. That's me, the dog, out there roaming around in the world. Here he is, you know.
Crossroads.
Crossroads and hanging out and just, you know, doing the do. I mean, that's what I felt when I saw the dog. He was just out there, you know, hanging out there. And I caught him just right.
Where is this?
This is Coney Island in New York. Early morning. Probably
It's funny that you said that other image is you, because knowing the impact and your relationship with music and jazz, and that the boards here on the boardwalk reminded me of piano keys, and that you know, just the different tones that are in these different tones for the boardwalk. You know, it creates a certain texture and movement to me in the image. And so when you say that this is you, you know, I said, oh yeah, I see it.
Because I felt in one with him. I mean, that's the right way I kind of saw myself, you know, a loner out there in the world, just, you know, doing stuff, but happy. He was happy, you know.
He was. Because lightly touched, when you said about the piano key, you can see it. You know?
Yeah.
And you know, aside from just aesthetics or repetition of form, there's movement with it, though. It's not just static, repeated shapes and stuff. It's this. And that has a lot to do with the different tones.
Well, I was still eating sardines. I had just gotten out of the Navy, 1960, the winter of 60. And I had gotten married just before I went in the Navy. And my wife came down and stayed with me when I was in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And then she was getting a job in New Jersey, I think it was. And she had sent her information and called and talked, and they said, oh yeah, we like what you do, and a great job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then when she got there and they saw that she was black, they thought, oh, somebody else got the job for her. So she was upset and she called me, and I said, well, you call Uncle Brad. And she hadn't met my uncle yet, because we were newly wedded, and she called him, and so she went there and stayed in the Bronx with him until I got out of the Navy. So when I got out of the Navy, we found a place in somebody else's apartment in New York. They had a big 8-room apartment. We had 3 little rooms in the back, 2 little rooms, and kitchen use and bathroom. That was it. And this day, Barbara had gone to work, and I was sitting in the window with nothing to do. And it started to snow, and I went out and I took pictures in the snow. I shot of 3 women in the snow, picture of people walking with their umbrellas in the snow. And I came back home because I was cold. It was cold. I didn't have a really good winter coat, you see. I had my Navy coat. And I was sitting in the window and I saw this guy coming. I saw him coming. And I shot a few pictures. He was on the sidewalk. And then when he got right near me, where I was looking out the window, he walked, you can see his footsteps, he walked out and into the middle of the street, and I thought, oh buddy, this is a good one. And I got it. I have a show with Bruce Silverstein right now, and the name of the show is Footsteps. And that's what I call this photograph. A lot of people like to call it Black Man in a White World, but that's adding or reading something into it. For me, it's footsteps. We all have footsteps. We all make steps in life. We all make little steps, big steps, all kinds of steps. And this guy is, you know, the wind is blowing and the snow is, and he's trudging on.
You really got a lot out of this negative. I mean, I'm looking at this from a printing perspective.
Oh yeah, it's a hard print to make.
This
White is the hardest thing.
Yeah.
And make it look white, and then to make it be snow.
Make it feel cold, too.
And
make it feel cold.
Yeah.
And the texture of the snow, you know, in New York City.
Exactly, that is so important.
It's white, and then you see when it gets kind of funky and dirty, and it's just...
But it was important for me to get the texture of the snow, too.
You did.
You know, it just wasn't white.
And those footsteps.
Yeah, well, that's printing.
Yeah, that's printing.
That's printing. That's something that nobody can teach you. It's something you do. Oh, Icarus.
Right. Tell us about this weightless image.
I had gotten a new lens. They had just come out, Nikon had just come out with a 21 millimeter lens. And I wanted to see, well, can I shoot with a 21 millimeter lens? It's wide, you know. Yeah. Well, so you can say wide angle, all these people, it doesn't mean anything. So there's no human connection for me in using a wide angle lens because it's very distorting. So they were throwing this little girl up in a blanket at Orchard Beach. And I was laying down like this, you know. And I saw this thing go like that. I thought, what is that? And I looked back and they were throwing this little girl in a blanket. And so I went over to the edge of the blanket with a 21 millimeter lens and I put it up like this so that I could see her falling with the sun. So since there's no lines, parallel lines, or any distance lines, it looks flat. So it feels like she's falling from the sun. And so I named it Icarus. You all know the Greek myth about Icarus. And his wings were waxed, he got too close to the sun. So that's what I related. But it's still weightless. It's suspended is the word I'm looking for here. So I
didn't even know the story about the blanket.
Yeah.
But it's just amazing experience.
I have ones of her. I like this one the best because it looks like it's like poof. Mm-hmm. But there are ones with her straight down, looked like she's trying to hit the ground, you know. And there's ones with her arms and different things. But I felt that this particular one image was the strongest for me because it was uplifting and bright and light. Wide angle lens too, but I wanted to include some feeling about this child, the innocence of this child. And I felt that the window was the world that this child was going to have to look at or look through or see. And I was a giant, you know, to her. I mean, I could feel that, you know, she was looking up at me. I was a giant to this child, but I was concerned more about how she was looking at me in the world that she was going to have to encounter.
So we have a few more.
Okay.
I just wanted to go through.
This is called the cat. Everybody says, I don't see the cat. I see a woman, man, with a beautiful shape putting on makeup. I said, yeah, well, look a little further. Oh, there's a cat. The cat's looking dead at me, you know. And I just loved that. He wasn't looking at her. He wasn't listening. He's like, what you doing, man? He confronted me.
Right.
You know, I was, you know, sneaking down doing this picture because she wasn't aware that I was taking a picture. Which is, I like to do that. I mean, I don't want people to always know that I'm there.
And it's such an odd position she's in as well.
Yeah.
I mean, to put her eye makeup on and not to be seated, so she knew what she was doing.
That's just strong, amazing. I love this photograph because everybody asked me about it. I was doing a job for Red Book magazine, and she was wearing different kinds of clothes, you know, as one of those fashion things. And so we'd actually finished shooting, and she put her bathing suit on because this is far out in the summertime. And she said, Adger, what do you want me to do? And I said, you did it. Yeah. And she loved this picture. One of the things she said to me, she said, Adger, I don't know if you can show that. And I said, what's wrong with you? Is it beautiful? She said, yeah, but look how big my feet are. I said, nobody's going to pay attention to your long feet.
And you said long feet.
I was messing with her. I ain't going to look at your old long feet.
She has a good understanding.
Who's going to look at your old long feet? You know, but I love the picture because it's another kind of moment that captures all the things that I was looking for.
It's very coy, very innocent, but then
And she wasn't
daring.
coy, and she wasn't innocent.
No, but it's daring. That's what I mean.
And
It has
daring,
that-
yeah.
it's very daring.
Yeah.
And how you're using also the female body as object and finding different forms. When you mention Weston.
Yes.
in this.
But this is actually really a shout out to Weston. A lot of my news are. But this particular one, I guess 1958 I did this. And that's Barbara. We were in the Navy together. And one morning I got up and the light was coming through the window. We had a dog named Coco. And I'd been out with Coco and I came in and she was sitting with her back to me and the light was on her shoulders and hair. I said, oh, that's great. I said, you know, bend over a little bit. You know, I said, turn to the side. She said, I'm not doing that. I'm not bending over and you're going to take a picture of me and put it in a Playboy or something. Are you crazy? I said, no. I said, you're not seeing what I'm seeing. She said, I don't care what you're seeing. I'm not. I said, just do this for me, please. Just, you know, I said, tuck your arm in and I shot the picture. And it was in the Metropolitan Museum when they first decided that photography was an art, you know. So it was in that show with Avedon, Penn, Gordon Parks, all the photographers who were doing so-called art photography were in that show. So we went to the opening and people were coming up to this photograph saying, that's an interesting photograph, very, very, very nice photograph. So she heard all the people, so she started standing behind everybody. So they would come from the stage, she said, oh, that's me. I said, you know, I'm going to shoot you. shape and form. I'm in big shape and form. This is, I put this lace up, and the light reflected first on her back. I said, just bend over a little bit more so that the shadow covers the back of your shoulders. And that's how I shot that. She was great. Had a beautiful form.
But I'm curious about the title of this.
Everybody is.
So can you tell us self-portrait?
It's a self-portrait.
It's a self-portrait.
Mm-hmm. You have to look.
You have to look.
I know, I've studied.
It takes time. Took me a while.
It's a self-portrait. It really is. Okay. In the bottom of the picture on the right,
Lower right quadrant.
the right corner, you see my arm coming out, and a shot of me is out of focus, but you can definitely see it's a person. Oops, I got my arm up like this, taking the picture. So that little bright arm that's coming out there, that's me. How did I show that? I need a pointer. Anyway, yeah, it's in the bottom right-hand corner. If you look at it long enough, you see it's out of focus. My face is out of focus on her thigh.
It's interesting, to say the title of this piece, and you think about here we are in the 21st century, and identity politics are such a big part of a lot of the themes in a lot of artists' work. So if you were to say self-portrait now, being who you are, and what is it saying about your identity, from a whole different perspective than the time in which you took the picture and you named the picture. So I think that's pretty interesting because it certainly shapes the way we might interpret or read into what we see or understand about it.
Because I see desire.
Yeah.
I see, the rooted branches, but I also see her body in terms of veins in her body. I see, like movement in her body, breasts and aspect. So I kept trying to figure out, is there movement in here? I did not see your arms, so.
But see, that picture for me, I call it self-portrait, not just because I'm in it, but because I think man is a reflection of woman, not the other way around. I've always felt that. Well, maybe it's because I was close to my mother too. And I think all men, we're a reflection. I'm the female, men go crazy when women put beautiful clothes on, or when they go nuts. They act crazy. They do. I mean, it's just, that's what.
And so the other aspects of your work also includes landscape, waterways, mist, light. Can you talk about how the elements have been important to you?
The elements have always been important to me, especially water, because water is very healing to the human form. Because water, we are filled with water. 75–80% of our body is water. But we never think about it. But when you go to the ocean and you play all day, or you just go to the ocean and look at the water, when you come home, you feel good. You don't know why you feel good. But nature and all natural phenomena, trees, all that, is in us. It's like when you go to the water, you go to the ocean, it's like plugging into an electric socket. That would be the best way to explain it, because the water heals you. You don't even know it. You got no idea, but the water in you connects with the water there.
What's your title for this image as well?
Yeah, well, I like musical titles. Duke delivers. Duke delivers because he does. His music delivers the best of whatever it is. You cannot not listen to Duke Ellington and not pat your foot or move in some way, because Duke Ellington is like that. Duke delivers.
And where is this? A stream?
This is at a place in New Jersey called the Black River.
I was thinking it's the thickness of it. You know, you see shapes, you
Oh,
see
yeah.
heads,
Yeah.
you see arms. It's the movement in that.
Well, water reflects all this stuff. We just don't see it. You know, most people don't see it because they're too busy looking and thinking about other things. This is from the Morning of the Blue Queen series. I did a series where I photographed this woman that usually after 8, 9, 10 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, anytime, because, and I called it the Morning of the Blue Queen, that whole series. There's 16 of them in the whole series, but this was the lead photograph of that series. And this was done on a Polaroid camera, SX70, and I invented a bypass instrument that would hold the shutter open while I painted different lights around her, et cetera, and then I would close it, and the photograph would come through. But I would cut the lights off. First I would focus, because Polaroid X has focus in the dark on her, and then I'd flip down the front of the camera, turn it off actually, and then I would paint around in different lights and stuff.
And this also has a three-dimensional
Oh, yeah.
effect as well.
Yeah. So I use little pen lights to paint around her with filters on them.
Finally, this image here.
This is the Reflex Series, from the Reflex Series. I used, first was using Mylar and crumpled up Mylar. And then later on I changed. I started using the insides of potato chip bags. And I would crush them and crease them, and I would get these
What
forms.
kind of bag, say again?
Potato chip bags.
Really?
You know, potato chip
I
bags,
thought you said that, but I said maybe I didn't get it correctly.
potato chip bags, fruit bag. All these bags they're making nowadays have this interior that protects the fruit or whatever, and it's very silvery. So I started using that. Mylar was expensive, and then I would reflect different colors off of it, because basically it's just black and white. But then I started using different colors to reflect on. I used anything I could find: my shirt, a piece of material, anything that had a color on it that would reflect. I did those after I came up here. These are all like 2016 when I moved here to Bridgeport. Same process.
Right. Well, I want to thank you for taking us on this really beautiful journey, because there were images, it's a mosaic of what it means to be an artist. And you have introduced us to a range of work, from the political points of views to reflecting life in a beautiful way. And I want to say thank you for
Thank
sharing
you.
this time with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you. And could you pass the plate now? Could the ushers come
And
forward?
thank you, Deb, for taking us on this journey
Yeah,
through this
thank you.
inquiry. I wanted to ask if there are any questions in the audience at all. And if there are, there's a microphone right over here. Or comments, for that matter.
How did the film work that you did for so many, many years relate to this work? This probably had a whole different set.
How did the movie work that I did relate to this? Well, they all relate in terms of my work, because what I try to do is to deal with human emotion in my work. In my movie work, the portraits that I did of movie people all deal with some kind of emotion. There's something that happens between me and them, and that's their idea. So yes, it was different in the sense that I was working. I wasn't just shooting my own photographs. But I found out that anything that, and even in advertising, there has to be something that draws you to it, you know. So in the movie work, it was just expressing a beautiful shot of Faye Dunaway, or a nice shot of Henry Fonda, where he's looking like the character that he's playing, or he's just being there. You're feeling him in those pictures.
What was your response when you were working on the films all those years? What was your role in that? Was it to follow the work shoot?
No, my role was called still photographer.
I know, but what does that include?
That includes anything that's moving on the set. Anything. The people in front of the camera, the people behind the camera, anything that is moving that has to do with movie making. But basically, the pictures that they used of mine were pictures I shot when they were shooting the picture, capturing moments of feeling that they used for what they call the one sheet, or in the old days, you go to the movies, they had 8x10s of scenes in the movie, and that's what it was about.
Weren't you in their way when they're shooting the movie?
You're in the way, you know. My movements. No. It's a very, very ticklish area when you're shooting stills on a movie. You have to be there, but you have to be unseen to a certain degree. Because when the camera's here and the actors are there, where are you going to be? Well, you got to be slick. You got to be smart. You got to pay attention when the director says, okay, let's rehearse this scene. Then you get your shot sometimes. Or there's a break. You say, okay, let's do that scene over again. Let's say, okay, wait a minute, we got to reload film. Say, can you give me another? Yeah. Oh, actors. Yeah. Okay, okay. All right. Or I didn't invent. I found a blimp that keeps the sound down. It was used for photographing animals so that you wouldn't hear them. And I brought it to the movie set, and I was able to capture things with people without them knowing while they were rolling. Sometimes they would say, I know I was working on one movie. And he said, Adger, what are you doing? I said, nothing. He said, we were working and you were standing there. What, were you shooting something? I said, no, I didn't. I didn't shoot anything. I was just looking through the camera. Oh!
What kind of device did you create? What was it?
It was a box. And
The camera was in the box?
The camera was in the box.
Okay.
They use it to shoot animals real close, so that they don't hear the sound. And it flips up, and then you see through the lens, but it's a black box with just an opening like that for the lens. So it had all these little things like that. So I just brought it to them, because I wanted to get these pictures when people were really, really involved in what they were doing, the character they were playing. Well, I mean, you can't stand there and go click. The man is making sound and all these other things. Well, the Leica made it easier, but still, once I got that blimp, I was able to do pictures, Nobody, so I was working on this movie. Garner, what's his name?
Jim?
Mm-hmm.
Jim Garner?
No, not Jim Garner. He played in cowboy movies for a long time. It was him. What's the name of the movie? I forget. But Lauren Bacall and James Garner. And James Garner, he was on my case all the time. And she was like a piece of work to work with. I'm telling you, she was really something. She was on my case 24/7. Adger, what are you doing? Son, don't shoot me from that side. In fact, don't shoot at all. Okay, So then I used the blimp. And if the director was standing here, I would stand on the other side of the camera. Sometimes I would be down low shooting, through his leg. You had to be very, very delft and quiet and be, agile. A lot of times I'd be on one knee shooting, around something, And then you have to work with the camera crew, say, hey man, let me shoot over your shoulder. The focus puller, you say. And if you don't have a good relationship, say, no, man, they can say that, you're in my way. No, you're in my way. But if you make friends with the camera crew and this one and that one, it's all about understanding and working with people movies, I worked with one director, and everybody said, Adger, he hates still photographers. Don't even, go there. Just shoot the rehearsals and don't try to shoot anything else. So I walked on the set the first day and I introduced myself to him. I said, I'm the still photographer. If you have any problems, just let me know. And I didn't have any problems at all. And everybody said, what did you say to him, man? He treats you really like a real person, man. Everybody else he's screaming at. What did you say to him? I said, I introduced myself to him and told him if there's any problem with me, come and just say something to me. And I found out that was really good to do. Introduce yourself to everybody first day on the set. Everybody. Especially the actors, When I met Katharine Hepburn, I went in, I said, I'm Adger Cowans, and I'm your photographer. She said, very nice, very nice. Nice to meet you. I'm sorry, I'm a ham actor. And so I never had any problems with her. I talked to Henry, everybody. You gotta, make that, let them know that you are there and what you're gonna do. Even though they know that. But a lot of times when actors are doing their scene, when they're actually shooting, they don't want anybody there but the camera. They don't want to see somebody else, So a lot of times I'd shoot over the director's shoulder because usually they were short and I was tall. I would work to the other side. Sometimes I had to, be real tricky and say, I'd stand on one side of the camera where I wasn't going to be. And then when they say roll it, the director would come and stand in front of me. I said, okay, I got you, buddy. So I started reversing it. So when he would come, I would slip to the other side of the camera where I really wanted to be. Because the director can stand on either side of the camera. But most times they favor the right-hand side. Or if they're sitting in the stool, I worked with Francis. Francis was great. Francis directed from his Sunbeam. He was hardly ever on the set. When he came on the set, he was going, where do you want to be, man? He never bothered me. In fact, he protected me a couple of times from the DP. DP said, get out of the way. Can't do that. So when the shot was over, Francis said, did you get what you needed? And I said, not really. He said, okay, run that again for Adger. And the DP went off. He's just a still man. This is my set. Francis said, let him shoot that man. So I found out in my years of working, you go up to the director and you play up with him. How you doing, man? Need coffee? You get, once people know who you are and your personality and working in the movies, and you can use that, that friendship, open up that way so that when you're on the set, they know what you do. You're not a stranger. You're on the set all the time. So it's and I've gotten some great pictures. I love Faye Dunaway. She was great to work with. Her mother came on the set one time and said, could you get me some nice pictures of my daughter? I said, yeah, sure, no problem. So I shot a bunch of Polaroids and gave them to her next day on the set. She says to me, what did you say to my mother? she loves you. I ain't saying anything to her. Well, she's just talking about you all the time. What did you say? But it's that kind of relationship you have to have with people. You have to let people be who they are and work around who they are, not try to change them, especially in the movie business, you know. You work with a director or actor who's like full of himself, and there are a few of those, the young ones coming up. Don't bother me, I can't do a picture right now. And then they get middle of the picture and say, you don't have any pictures of me in that scene? No, I don't, you told me not to. Then it works two ways. And I found out being a still photographer is really a powerhouse role. You have control of a lot if you just relax. Because everybody needs pictures. All the different departments need photographs. They need for advertising. They need it for publicity, to talk about the movie if they do something in the newspaper. They need it for everything. So, you just have to be quiet and do your job. And the next job you just say, no, I can't work for that, I have to get this much money. But if they like what you do, and it's the international advertising people that I actually work for on a movie set. If it's 20th Century Fox, I work in the publicity department. They're the ones that use the photographs to go internationally. So they're the ones that say, I like this or I don't like that, or could you get a shot of him closer or this or that. Nobody else, no matter what they say, it doesn't matter. You say what they say. It only matters with those people that make those decisions about where those photographs are going to be used. So I try to please them.
I think we're about out of time.
Sorry.
Perfect time. No, that was a great question to ask. But there's one more question. I see two more.
Go.
I know just from knowing you a little bit that you've talked about your mother and her role in influencing you as a photographer. And I just wonder if you could talk about your motivation, like at what age you became aware of photography, what led you, and specifically about your mother and her photography.
Before you answer, I wanted the second question also. Mm-hmm.
I'm traveled from Newport, Rhode Island today. I was wondering if you could speak on shooting at the Newport Jazz Festival and your experience.
Okay.
Okay.
Combining those two.
My mother was a humanitarian. Her lesson to me was love. My father's lesson was hard work. My mother wasn't a great photographer. She was an amateur photographer. It was something she did, she wanted to learn. I didn't really learn anything about photography from my mother. I learned more from my uncle, who was an amateur photographer. But I wasn't interested in photography. I wasn't interested in photography at all. Even when I said I was going to go to OU, it was just like, because my mother said, you're not going to sit around the house and do nothing this summer. And my sister's boyfriend had a magazine that said, Ohio University gives a degree in photography. So I went to my mother's house, I would go study photography. I didn't know I was getting into it. I really didn't know. And she said, well, when your daddy comes home, show it to him, talk to him. Showed it to my father. He said, what are you talking about? You out of your mind? You crazy? What's wrong with you? Photography is a hobby. You want to go to college and study a hobby? I said, well, he said, that's ridiculous. But my mother, she's a sweet talker. And so, honey, that's what he wants to do. And so, and as far as working, I'm sitting around the house. I got no money. I got nothing to do, and I wanted to go to the Newport Jazz Festival. I had a Leica, and I had another little Hexagon, I think. I really wanted to go to the Newport Jazz Festival. So it so happened that my agent called me and said, they want you to do some pictures for Theater Magazine. I said, really? He said, yeah, they want you to go to Newport and do. I said, they give me any money? He said, no. They're going to pay you when you come back, but, for the pictures. But so I had no money. I had nothing. So me and my friend Mario we were sitting down talking about it, and we were at the jazz club, and one of the guys said, I'm going up there, so can we get a ride with you? I'm telling you, no toothbrush, no, no nothing, just the clothes we have our back in the cameras. And I went up there and I shot Newport Jazz, and it was great. In those days, they loved photographers to take pictures. They didn't shoo you away like they do now. Like, do you have a press pass? In those days, you didn't need a press pass. You go out on the stage, you shoot backstage, whatever. So it was a great experience. And when it was all over, I had no way to go back home. I didn't have a bus ticket, I didn't have a train ticket, because the guys that brought us up said, oh man, we were leaving early. So there we were, hanging in space. So it's all over. They're taking the set down, they're cutting the lights off. Everybody's left. And I'm sitting there going, what the hell am I going to do? So I go backstage, Duke Ellington jumps in his car and this lady, and they go off in a flurry. I'm sitting there. And I'm saying, Jesus, what am I going to do? Louis Armstrong's sitting there, and he said, I said, no, thank you. He said, where you going, man? I said, I'm trying to get way back home. He said, you ain't got no ride? I said, hey, man, this dude ain't got no ride back. So the guys were going on the bus, Duke Ellington's man, said, hey, man, where you live? I said, 145th Street. He said, we gonna go across the bridge. He said, get in there. Luck, it's always been with me. Something happens, it brings,
Yeah.
And they talked all the way back. I could not go to sleep. I did not want to go to sleep because what they were talking about was so interesting, Hey, man, you still going with that girl living out Sunset? Nah, man. It's, oh, man, you love that girl, man. You always talk about her. And you played too many notes, by the way, man, on that song. You went up on F sharp, should have been C, and they're talking, well, don't leave him alone, man. You can't even play trumpet, man. You play to it. And they were just back and forth like that, talking about their lives, their wives, and the music. I learned so much. And when I got out of the bus to go home, I was in heaven.
That's beautiful.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for coming this evening and sharing this wonderful time. Thank you.
Thank you.